Welcome to Private Banking Strategies Podcast with Vance, Lowe, and Seth Hicks, your secret weapon to protect your assets and never have to start over financially again. Vance and Seth help high net worth individuals, families, business owners, and investors structure an asset-protected, tax-free fortress for their families. Learn how to keep what you earn and use the velocity of money to create your own private banking system. Join us on this journey as we explore the secret strategies of the rich and political elite and help you take total control of your financial security. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to Private Banking Strategies with Vance, Lowe, and Seth Hicks. Audience, you're in for a treat. Here's the thing, is that today's going to be a great discussion, probably going to be a little bit longer of a podcast because there's so much to cover. But in this podcast, you are going to hear 8 points of what private banking strategies can do for you. Very specific points. And Vance and Seth are going to be talking about a lot of different things, but they're going to sprinkle those in throughout. So make sure you listen for those points, and Seth will kind of give you that prompt when the time comes. Speaking of that, Seth, how are you?
Doing great, Eric. Man, we're excited to bring these values to folks today and discuss the retirement trap and things to be aware of in traditional retirement planning, and compare that to what private banking strategies brings to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. Vance, good to be back with you, my friend.
It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. And our topic today seems so timely. We're bombarded continually with people who are worried if the retirement is going to even be there, if Social Security is going to be there. So we thought we would address that in this podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the media's job these days, and we've talked about this before, is to give you shock and awe, right? They're going to tell you the worst possible headlines just to get you to tune in. Some of them are real, some of them are not. Let's just be honest. But more and more, I agree, Vance, people are concerned. And so I love the fact that they're coming here for some great information, and I'm ready to learn. So let's get going.
All righty. Today's topic actually comes out of R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And people can go to this book and actually read the written word, so to speak, because we're going to hit upon the most important topics. These topics are found on page 80 or 65 and 66. But we're going to talk about the retirement trap. And what that means. Back in the day when Nelson was really doing his thing about bringing this private banking strategy to the forefront, he made a prediction, and people laughed at him back in 1979 because he talked about Social Security and social programs in general and why they're set up at the beginning to fail. And we've all heard throughout our lifetime about Social Security, and it's not set up properly, and it will eventually fail. So a lot of people have planned their retirement around that. A lot of people plan for retirement. One of the issues we're going to talk about is retirement and entitlement. Is Social Security an entitlement? Are any government programs entitlements? So we want to get into a little bit of why these programs might fail. Specifically, Social Security, let's talk about that. He said that Social Security would announce that Social Security is failing. But before it fails, they're going to prop it up. Now, Seth and I have been preaching this to our clients for years and years and years, that propping it up means that they're going to be going to what's known as ERISA. This is an acronym for Government-Owned Qualified Trusts. What does that mean? It means that the 401ks, the IRAs, the Roths, the pensions, and any other qualified government plan falls in under ERISA. And they have that earmarked. It's kind of funny that because it's a social program, socialistic program, it's kind of for the good of all. And it's talking about government thinking they know better what our needs are than we do. But in this case, they've earmarked the ERISA programs to go in, seize that money, and shore up Social Security. Right off the bat, we know that government feels like that half of that money is theirs. Mm-hmm. That they created the problem in the first place, and then they create this exception, the 401k, the IRA exception, to the problem, but they take total control. So it will fail. And but part of that failing will mean gathering in all what the average individual has set aside in these government programs, thinking that they're going to be safe. How safe was the Berlin Wall, and how fast did it come down? How shocking was that when they announced that they were tearing down the Berlin Wall? Mm-hmm. How shocking was it, the news of the collapse of the Soviet Union?
Yeah.
And today, it's just, they're all doomed to failure because, again, of what government themselves have put together at the beginning. And Seth, go into a little deeper of kind of what we're leading into here, of why people are so worried about this. And we can start introducing some of these points of you don't have to be worried. There are alternatives.
Sure. Yeah, we're talking about big picture policy. And these go to the fundamental heart and root of policy decisions and policy that people have for their own financial welfare and for their own family values, Eric. And there's a great division in our country now. I don't know how great the divide is. The mainstream media would purport that it's, us half against another half, where I think that it's a much smaller minority that's propagating the mainstream propaganda effectively. And the policy that we're talking about is government control versus your control. And I think that there's a majority of Americans in today's society that want to take back control of their finances. They want the government out of their business. They don't want to be overtaxed anymore. I mean, did you know, Eric, that the American Revolution, one of the main revolutionary points was a 3% tax without representation? 3%.
No.
And consider what people are being taxed now. I mean, when you have an estate, that passes from one generation to the next. We have a client right now with a, multi 8-figure estate that's being transferred to the children of that estate. And more than, half is being taken. And we've talked about the artist formerly known as Prince, and more than half of his estate is worth $200 million being cut in half by the federal government in the state of Minnesota. I think people are tired of that type of thing. So we're talking about big picture policy. Do you want the government to control your retirement through Social Security, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, and any other government sanctioned scheme? Or do you want the control of your money and your retirement without any government regulation, penalty, restriction, or oversight? Because that's what we're talking about. We're comparing a general Social Security system and government qualified plans versus a private banking strategy. With the private banking strategy, and here it is, you're in control. That's one of the main points. You're in control of your money without any government penalty or restriction, or how much income you take out through retirement or when you can take it. All of the distributions that you take from your private banking strategy in retirement years is income tax free. And that's pursuant to Internal Revenue Code 7702. So for those folks who want to drill down and read about 7702, these type of plans and strategies have been used for over 100 years by the rich and politically elite for this very reason, because they know they have control.
Well, here's the thing is that if, as a common layperson, that would be me, as a common layperson, I've been paying more attention to what the government is doing and what rules they're making, what rules they're changing. And if you really do pay attention, you see the small things. So they eliminated the stretch IRA. And for the audience members that do or don't understand that, it used to be that you could inherit an IRA and then take the payments of it over your own lifetime. Now they've eliminated that because the government wants their taxes quicker. So even folks that aren't uber wealthy, I mean, you mentioned a couple folks there that, like Prince, right? Artist formerly known as Prince, half of his estate's gone. It's not just the wealthy. They're making it so you can't take the IRA if you inherit one from maybe your parents. You can't take it over your lifetime. You have to take it within 10 years because the government wants their money now, which not only do they get the tax money from that, it also kicks up your income because you have to take it so quickly that all of a sudden your income tax is higher too. So it's affecting everybody.
It really is. Seth, why one of the biggest questions we get when people hear that, hey, you can take control of your own system, we get back the question, well, what risk will I be taking if I take control? Address that for us, will you?
Sure. That's a great question and a great issue to discuss. With a private banking strategy, you have no risk. And that's because it's not tied to the market. It's not tied to any type of index. It doesn't fluctuate in a bull run or a bear market. With no luck or with no skill or guesswork whatsoever, you have a predictable, guaranteed value in your retirement income. At any point in the time frame, you can understand what your cash value is there. And there are illustrations that demonstrate, if you're putting premium amounts in, what your cash value will accelerate. And we've talked about this in some of the just recent podcasts and provided resources with those illustrations that show the value of compounding growth. So the next point for those note takers are that with a private banking strategy, you have a guaranteed, predictable growth and a retirement value and a retirement income value that you can see day to day, week to week, month to month, with no luck, skill, or guesswork, not tied to the market, and there's no risk.
You see what, another way to say this is that America became very strong and very powerful in a very short time. In world history, no other nation was able to rise to power as quickly as the United States. And it's because they practiced very solid, sound principles. Back in the day, it was you save a portion of your money. You get a guaranteed return on that investment with no risk, and take very little. After all of those have been set aside, then you can put it into like exotic things. Back then, exotic things was the stock market or, gold or silver or whatever else. But you only risk what you could afford to lose at the time. And so Seth just told us that those guaranteed vehicles are still available. There is no risk. I guess there might be a risk of non-completion if we're too lazy or not disciplined enough to put more money in there. Nelson had a great comment in these sections, and one of the things he would get people interested in is making the statement, if you knew by the time you retired, if you were putting money aside into a system all of the time up to that point, and now you wanted to take passive income off of it, if you knew you were going to receive all of that money back, totally income tax advantaged, Would you want to put more in it and put more aside if you knew that that was a guarantee? Everybody says yes. You know,
it's a no-brainer.
it's a no-brainer, and that's what we're going to. But we have to deal with government right now, so we have to deal with socialistic programs. We have to deal with the mentality of our neighbors and the people who now have grown up and are used to what things are happening to us. But are they prepared? And the answer to that is they don't have a clue as to what can happen to them. They don't believe at this time. They think because everybody's doing 401ks and IRAs, it's the right thing to do. But it is definitely giving the control over. It's the right thing to, people are disheartened right now. And here's a good telltale story about what's happening today with banks. Interest rates are on the rise, aren't they? Boy, they're just heading up. Inflation has gone sky high. But have they started increasing the reward of deposits or CDs? The average when I was growing up was over 4%. It was between 4 and 6%. And now it's not even, maybe 1%. I don't know what it is today, but they're backing off of that, but yet still charging the higher interests. So there's a lot of problems out there that we've got to solve. And the only source, and the reason we're bringing this retirement trap in, is we have to talk about it. Everybody feels like, and everybody talks about, because their parents, their aunts, uncles, all had a chance maybe to retire. Now, I'm not talking whether they were able to retire financially independent. Most of them did not. They had very, very little, but they did have Social Security. Seth, is retirement guaranteed in our country, and where did it come from?
Yeah, no, I don't think that retirement is guaranteed by any stretch. In fact, I think right now we're seeing people that are shocked with the values in their so-called retirement accounts that are government qualified plans, and more and more are seeing the writing on the wall that there's a lot of volatility in the value of those 401ks and 403bs, and that the volatility is scary for them. And we've been on a cycle of the longest bull run in the equities market in history. And do you think that that's going to continue another 30 years? It's not going to continue another 30 years. And part of that appreciations come from the printing of money and the national debt, which is $31.5 trillion as of January 2023. And those type of factors create high volatility. Now, which brings me to the next point with the private banking strategies system. There's no volatility. Your cash value never goes backwards if a market tumbles. The principal and the growth are locked in, and they never decrease. There's no market risk in that, somewhat like we were discussing with the guaranteed predictable growth, and that the value of your retirement income is a certain and a known, and you know what's there as long as you're practicing the system, and you don't get surprised. You don't get surprised by fees. You don't get surprised by market corrections. You don't get surprised if the markets go tumbling down. You have actually nothing to lose there. So those are major distinctions that separate a private banking strategy from something that's in a retirement plan that's tied to a market or with government restriction.
Do you see yourself in that story? Do you feel like you are generating a lot of revenue but are not moving forward as fast as you would like? Are you ready for help? Please call Private Banking Strategies at 817-200-4777 or visit us at www.privatebankingstrategies.com.
So let's drill that in. Let's really drill that nail in so people can understand what we're trying to tell them. How would you like a system that you practice and that every single day you're better off than you were the day before? You know, if you look at the broad picture in your lives today financially, can you say that? Am I better off this month than I was the month before, this week, today, tomorrow, whatever else? Oh, the market went down and it just, crashed today. Am I still going in the right direction? This is what we're talking about. So the reason I asked the question up front, and Seth has addressed that a little bit, but there was no such thing as retirement. You look back, if you're religious, you look back in the Bible. I can't find any place where Moses retired, for instance. Okay. But it came about in what was the year 1890. And what was happening is that they had a growth spurt of the population in Germany, and the young people who were graduating school and everything couldn't find jobs because all these journeymen and all these jobs were still occupied by older people. And so government put in a socialistic program, so saying that, hey, we know better than everyone else, and they created what's known as a retirement program. That was Germany. Well, America, not recruited, but there's a lot of people who moved to America over the years. They brought that idea with them. It caught on here in America, and now it's as if it's an entitlement. Boy, at age such and such, I'm going to retire. It used to be 65. Now everybody's saying 70. And I'm saying there's no such thing as a retirement. There may be a lifestyle change. Hopefully there is. But as far as working and doing the things that we want to be able to continue that. Did you know?
So let me clarify there, Vance, because you're saying there's no such thing as retirement, just kind of a lifestyle change. And I view it as retirement means you don't have to work if you don't want to, or you don't have to work the same job that you've been working for however long if you don't want to, right? If you work hard enough, save enough, and do a plan like this, sure, you don't have to go, you don't have to punch that clock. But like you love what you do. Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to retire. I mean, we've talked about that off air. You're just like, no, I'm helping change people's lives. I can see myself doing this pretty much forever. And that's kind of where my attitude is, not necessarily what I do on a day-to-day basis, but I want to keep busy. But I would love to do more maybe hobby work, get paid for some of it. Sure. But I don't have to, right? If I plan well, I don't have to.
You hit the nail right on the head. Did you know they need to title that deaths are caused? What are the common causes of death? Cancer, this, that, and the other. And they need to put in there right at the top, retirement.
Mm-hmm.
You know that people, a large percentage of very stressful job-related individuals who retire are dead within 5 years?
Yes, I've heard that.
We've heard that time and time again because they can't cope. They can't replace the depression, and all the things start breaking down. So retirement, I think we should use a different word. In other words, a lifestyle change is what we're wanting. Yes, hopefully if things work out, everything will be, we can be more independent, but we can move into that position as soon as that independence happens. And then it's a matter of, for me, it's trying to teach people, give people back, help people be more independent instead of more reliant. So, all right, Seth, make a comment on that. I always love those words that you have. So
sure, yeah. I mean, I think retirement is a mindset, and that we're ultimately wanting to be financially independent and free to do the things that bring us the most joy and bring the most value to our family and to the world. And so when you're doing what you love, you're not working. As you often said, Vance, your dad told you, hey, find something that you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And you've done that. And so I think that there's success stories all throughout our clientele of people who have maximized these strategies and taken this to new levels of financial freedom and growth. And they're doing what they love to do, no matter what age they are, whether they're 85 or whether they're 40. And so this is a way of life and a long-term strategy that to me can't be compared to anything. It has no real opponent. It has no real competitor that can compete for all these various reasons that we're describing. So, but yeah, Eric, I think you're right. You build this plan and you've got the ability to take distributions from your private bank in a totally tax-free environment. And, which is able to fuel hobbies or other investment or whatever you want to do. And I mean, I keep going back to these resources we provided in a couple of the last podcasts where it talks about, funding a premium for 4 years at $20,000, like on a college tuition. I think we titled it, "What Can You Do with a College Tuition?" And look at the values at the end of that person's life at retirement age at 70, and just the extreme difference between that and Social Security. They're pulling in six figures easy every year, pulling down out of their bank and without any tax consequence whatsoever. And I mean, it creates an absolute freedom. So those things kind of blow me away, and it's makes early adoption a no-brainer, especially for those listeners out there who have young kids. I was just talking with one of our clients who has, a number of young children. They're in their 30s, the parents are, and they were amazed, like me, at what the illustrations show, just with a very minimal contribution. We've talked about this on prior podcasts with you, Eric, and the waterfall creation between parent to children and parent to grandchildren, and that waterfall effect of wealth creation that I don't think you can get anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I mean, we're running low on time on this podcast, and I kind of like to hit a speed round to really get those 8 points that we talked about at the beginning. You've touched on a lot of them, but I'd like to go through them just so the audience has the ability to make sure that they've got them checked off their list. And then you can touch on them if we think we need to expand on it. Is that okay with you?
Well, let me hit number 4.
Sure.
For a minute, because 4 is the root of everything we're working on. It's called taxed advantaged. Our problem in a socialistic country is taxation. It's called Nelson Ash called it part of the 5 laws that we have to defeat every day to be successful. And one of them is called the Willie Sutton Law, which was a robber of banks. And he put that in there because when you accumulate money, someone is going to want to take it away from you. Government wants your money. They feel like they are entitled to it and they should have it. So everything we've talked about today pivots on this item number 4. Okay. We've got to have tax relief. We've got to have a system where they can't come in and tax it. And the best way to do that is to not create taxable events. And this is what we teach our people. So liquidity. Seth, tell us about that. That's number 5.
In your private banking strategy, you create a capitalized bank where you have access to the capital at any time for any purpose. There is no loan application. If you're going to go invest in a piece of real estate, Eric, you don't have to submit any loan application. You pull your cash value out and you go and make that investment. If you have a need for, a new vehicle, whatever the case may be that you might need to purchase or invest in, or for an emergency, it's there for you. Now, contrast that with your government qualified plans, your 401ks. You can't take it out too soon. You can't take it out too late. There's penalties if you do take it out too early, and there's penalties if you take it out too late. And no matter when you take it out, you're going to pay taxes. And, one of the things that we're trying to communicate is that, though, do you think taxes are going to decrease in the future, or do you think they're going to increase?
Yeah, we all know the answer to that.
they're going to increase.
They're going up. Yeah. They want their money.
There's, we can track the numbers between a government qualified plan and a private banking strategy. And if you've got 500,000 in your 401k and you got 500,000 in your private banking strategy, and they grow and grow and grow, your private banking strategy, tax free, completely liquid, no penalties, no taxation when you take things out, versus the 401k, the private banking strategy is going to outperform it.
Yeah.
And it's going to outperform it even in a greater fashion if taxes go up. And I think we agree, and most of our listeners probably feel the same way, that taxes are not going to be going down.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna hit these points quickly, gentlemen, and I'll remind the audience of which ones we've definitely covered in depth in the podcast, and then there's a couple on this list that I'd like you to touch on. So, number one, guaranteed predictable growth and retirement income. You guys touched on that a lot. No volatility is the next point, which you also touched on in this podcast. So go back and review that, listener. You're in control. Seth talked a lot about that. Tax advantage and liquidity we just spoke about. Now, getting down here to number 6. I'd love for you to expand on this a bit. Fees don't compound against you.
Eric, if you know how money works, if you know what the problem is, you will also figure out how to solve it. You won't need to rely on other, quote, professional people who have their own interests. That's the beauty of what we're showing here. The people run their own strategies and they expound them. You, for instance, know exactly the freedom that creates. So those fees, there's not any.
Yeah.
They're already taken out, stripped out. What you have there, every single day, it increases, and there's no fees piling up against you.
Yeah.
And this bears mention too. Off air, Vance and I were talking about one of our clients who has an IRA and maybe $40,000 in it. They were paying $400 a month for, I think it was Schwab, to manage that $40,000. So they're paying over 10% a year to manage that. And how are you going to have legitimate growth? How are you going to have a legitimate retirement strategy with an IRA where Schwab is eating up over 10% in management fees? So one of the statistics that I researched said that as much as 1/3 to 1/2 of your entire savings over time will be consumed in fees that traditional retirement plans have. Now compare that with the private banking strategy. There is no fee. There's no fee as you progress. The fees are deducted in the initial capitalization of the bank. And when you take the contract out with the life insurance company, it's all built in. You know exactly what you're paying. You know exactly what your cash value is, and it only increases from there. There's no hidden fees. There's no surprises. There's no taxation. So there's no going backwards with your values. So you can easily understand those bottom line numbers and understand where you're going to be at there.
Yep, absolutely. Now, the 7th point that you have on here is income tax-free legacy, and you've spoken about that on previous podcasts. You also touched on it on this one. So I'm going to move on to the 8th one, which I'll be honest, guys, this is probably the biggest one for me. Your 8th point here is peace of mind. Touch on that for me.
Sure. Well, go ahead, Vance.
Well, all I'm saying is once people are in control and they see things going in the right direction, that they know that the only person that could make this fall is themselves.
Yeah.
Just think of the satisfaction and the peace of mind. I don't have to worry about this part of my life. I can now attend and put my attention to my family, my kids, my grandkids, the community, my neighbors, whatever else, my career. The peace of mind there and it's so healthy. You know, it's the light at the end of the tunnel. It's the part that wow, I've been searching for this all my life. And is it really this good? Every day I wake up, I think, wow, it still worked. I'm better off today than I was last night.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a good way to wake up.
yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Well, this has been a fantastic podcast again. When the audience is listening and they're hearing these 8 points and they're like, you know what? I don't have 6 or 7 of those out of the 8 with my current situation, and they want to reach out. They want to get more information. Give them the best contact info, would you?
Sure. You can find us on our website at privatebankingstrategies.com. That's privatebankingstrategies.com. And Eric, there you have a free book offer for our guests that's called What the Banks Don't Want You to Know. It's secrets that they implement that you can implement as a private banker. And we offer that free to our guests, either in audio or written form. And then they exchange an email for us, and we provide ongoing emails that provide educational content and explanatory content that helps them understand what private banking strategies is. And then, of course, we do this podcast regularly, and there's probably approaching 50 podcasts on the website and the resources where they can literally go from the fundamentals to every different type of aspect and piece of information that they could want to know is there, so they can get their head around those things. If you've done those things, you've read our book, you've listened to some podcasts, and things resonate with you, then the next step is to schedule an exploratory call with Vance. And ultimately, you put your own financial information into an algorithm which Vance prepares for you, which we call an 8-year roadmap. And what that does is it tells you exactly how these strategies will work for you, and with the income you have, and the assets and the debt that you have, and how amazing the results will be for you particularly. So that's the process.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. We really appreciate it.
You bet. And our last thank you always goes to you, listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Private Banking Strategies podcast with Vance Lowe and Seth Hicks. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Vance and Seth come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. We humbly ask that you share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this actually does help others find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Private Banking Strategies, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day, and we'll see you next time.
Did that story feel like it was about you? Do you feel you should be making more progress toward your financial goals? Do you feel stuck? Let us help you get unstuck. Are you ready to take action and get your own private bank? Please call Private Banking Strategies at 817-200-4777 or visit us at www.privatebankingstrategies.com.
Thank you for listening to the Private Banking Strategies podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Private Banking Strategies. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.